Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from New York, 1916, on the white end David Janowski, playing against Capablanca. Alright, we have on board a Slav Defense, 3 knights, bishop f5, queen b3, met with queen b6. White captures on b6 here. Best is to question the queen. Two options now for black. Do know if you exchange on b3, that scores really well for white, playing with the half-opened a file. But in this game, we get the queen exchange, and now c takes d5. How to recapture on d5? Pawn, knight. This position here reminds me of a line out of the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation. This moment here, where white has just captured on f6, how do you take in this situation with the pawn or the queen? Well, you're going to end up with the double isolated f-pawns. The question here really is, do we want to have the queens on or off with the double isolated f-pawns? The answer, off. So you go like this, and in that way, the damaged king side is not really an issue. King is not going to be in any serious trouble with the fractured king side with the queens not on board. So applying a similar logic at this moment in the game here. How to recapture on d5? Well, the answer here is with first the piece, the knight. The reason for this, in the end, we're going to end up with double isolated pawns here. That's how it plays out in the game. The question in this position, before we make the capture on d5, is do we want to have the knights on board if we're going to end up with double isolated b pawns? The answer is no. We don't want the knights on board because in this situation we could see the knight already eye up that weakness on b5 and be a pretty irritating piece. There'd already be a threat there on c7. So we first exchange knights. We're removing a piece, in other words, that could potentially exploit these double isolated b pawns. Let's get some more development in here. And pretty cool move here. This is the moment that really grabbed my attention in this game when I made my first pass through it. We have here bishop d7. So may seem more natural to play e6 and develop the dark square bishop. Why is black maybe not going with this? White could consider hunting the light square bishop. It's not necessary that black play bishop d7 and only then e6. There's a flexible move in f6, controlling the knight, maybe keeping this option open, maybe shooting for g5, e5. In this game, what's the big idea with the bishop dropping back to d7? Well, this will be revealed soon enough. A bit of an odd move at the moment. Putting the bishop, in other words, inside of this pawn chain. Let's get some more development in. Pieces on healthy squares. No need to castle. It is the end game. We want this king closer to the center. We have just that. And now white is aiming for this weakness on b3. That's covered. Follow up from here is f5. We don't want to see e4. g3. And here we go. The reveal here. Bishop on d7. What is it doing? Well, this bishop is, how to view it, bishop cares about the well-being of these double isolated b pawns. It assists in their expansion. It's there to support the move in the game, b5. This is a big deal. Knight's ready to jump in, and when captured, black gets to do what? Straighten out his pawn structure. Continue to advance with b5, b4 one day. What should white do about this knight dropping into c4? In the game, we see f3, and the knight lands there. If white tries to cut out this intersection square, it's not without its drawbacks. So in other words, if b3 is played, the knight can return here and remind white that there is a weakness on a3. Bishop b2, maybe we have some repetition of position. Okay, also note, position like this, if white says, I'll just play b4, this is this structure here is actually better for black when you consider these important c-file squares, c4 as a whole, c5, because there are two b pawns around, c5 is not a hole. What black had angle for here, it takes some time, but yeah, eventually we get this knight to its dream square d6, and there you go, it's going to drop into c4. White will have to either work around that knight or capture it and give black a connected passed pawn. All right, in this game, we get f3. Follow up, knight c4, and from here we get bishop captures knight. If you try and work around the knight, so for instance, if you parry the threat here on e3, here's one path for black. You could go with a b4 break, forcing line here. In the end, white is up a pawn, but how healthy, how meaningful would that extra pawn be? Not so meaningful. The b pawn's pretty much offset, and this rook is not your normal 5-point rook. Ready to win the pawn or the bishop. Bishop c3, you're already asking for some trouble. Hinge bishop. All right, the knight on c4 in this game is immediately removed. Now, why the bishop for knight exchange? It's revealed right away. White wants to break with e4. The knight is there to assist. Follow up from here, king f8, or excuse me, f7, getting out of the way, preparing to meet e5 with bishop to e7. That's how it plays out in the game. Another approach by white is to capture on f5 or d5. A downside with how white plays it here, e5. e5 right away, well, at this moment here, is a hole. So you could try to maneuver the knight into that e5 square. Now, how do you do that? Well, you first resolve this tension. Doesn't really matter in which way do you capture. After the captures on these squares, you follow up. Here's how white could follow up with f4. And next up, knight f3 into e5. It's considered equal. Knight on e5, you're either going to have to work around it or take it and give white a connected passed pawn. That was a way forward for white. In this game, though, we see e5. Bishop e7 follows. We expand with the b pawn. Doubling up now on the a file. Only move now for white. Rook a to b1. Otherwise, b4 is there. The a pawn is pinned. Rook a to b1 it is. h6. Now, this is really nice play here. Notice Capablanca not rushing with the b4 break. He's playing on both wings. Look at these bishops. They have an eye on both sides of the board. Well, really not this diagonal so much, but you back the bishop off here. They have an eye on both sides. Very flexible position here for black. Don't rush with b4 in this position. In the game h6, if you go in for b4 here, this really goes nowhere for black. There'd be a capture, and then this follow-up break. Chop, chop. It could be white that is maybe better soon. Dark square bishop exchange, knight dropping into c5, strong knight versus not so great bishop, possible problems on the 7th rank. Not so fast. We might say black is not so fast to exchange b pawn for a pawn as long as these guys are still around, as long as the A pawn is still around, B3 is never an idea. There would be a cost, pawn would fall. So he plays on both wings. Prep work for a G5 advance. Knight F3 is played here, and the response is G5. Now here's a question. If instead H4 is played, are we still going to see G5? No. After H4 and G5, this would be giving white a file to work with. These rooks, just going back right here, at this moment here, these rooks currently don't do anything. The black rooks are more active. Black is a moment away. Black gets to decide when a file is cracked open on the queen side. These guys have to simply wait. So if you're meeting H4, in other words, in this position with G5, you'd be giving the white rooks something to do. The king has to go on the defensive. Better, what would be better in the event of H4 in this position, a nice way to slowly improve here is black. You could inch your king up to right about here. And then you are just a moment away from being aggressive. King G4, maybe grab the pawn. Not right away, for as long as these rooks are on, but those rooks may not always be around. After the rooks are exchanged, then you're maybe a bit closer to going into Pac-Man mode with your king. So that's a tiny way to make progress in the event of H4. No G5 break. Inch your king up to right about here. Maybe then revisit a B4 pawn break. Notice after this H4 move, we don't have to worry about the king getting hit with the check. We have a reliable pawn there, securing our king's post. All right. In this game, the response to H6 is with knight F3, G5, knight maneuvers. Not really sure what it should be doing. Black playing on both sides of the board, ready to take, do something along the G file. We see just that right away. In this position, we get G takes F4. Computer says maintain the tension and go for a bishop, a light square bishop improvement. It has its eye on King G7, Bishop E8, H5, maybe even G4 into H3, kind of poking around at some light squares in white's camp. There is a dream square for the the light square bishop, and that is E4. This is a big intersection square. If it ever gets there, if it's removed, it's going to be removed with the knight. Yeah, then you're going to end up with a connected passed pawn. And what would be the imbalance we're looking at then? A good versus bad bishop. Not the way forward in this game. We have the tension resolves here on F4. And now the focus here is on the G file. Knight G2, this is a step in the wrong direction. Better is knight C2. It may be the case white was thinking in the game after knight G2 and rook G4 that he wanted to play H3 and didn't want to see rook H4. The knight from G2 covers that square. Turns out after rook G4 and H3, it wouldn't really be a good idea to create that weakness on G3, so maybe white had second thoughts about playing it once these two moves were actually on board. How the computer wants to play this position is with knight C2. And after this pivot on G4, it says go ahead and question the rook with H3. Now, notice something here. If this rook tries to be aggressive, targeting the H-pawn, position like this reminds me of a game I covered between Leela and Stockfish, where Stockfish got the rook trapped on the edge. That's sort of what we're looking at here after the H-pawn is defended. How do you get this rook off of the H-file? No. No. Sort of a stuck rook now. So knight C2, would have been better than knight g2. You could meet rook g4 with h3, and after the rook backs off, you're able to play to g1 and immediately challenge the rooks. They're in direct contact. They would be in direct contact with one another. There is no knight. There would be no knight obstructing those rooks on g2. Okay, in this game, fianchettoed knight, call it, rook g4, follow up rook g1. If you're playing h3 here, the rook backs off to g7. Next up, we double. We're attacking the knight. We're looking to get into g3. Uncomfortable situation for white. All right, in this game, we see rook g1, rook's doubled, knight now pinned. White's in a difficult spot. Bishop e1. Now we play on the other wing. We get this break in b4. There is now a path for the bishop to get to its dream square. In the game, it's pawn takes b4. If bishop takes b4, the response would be the same, and that is bishop a4. White's reply is with rook a1, that is top. If white goes defensive, preventing bishop c2, playing rook c1, let's just pause for a moment. I want to highlight the pickle that white is pretty much in. The pieces don't have really any moves. There is the pin on the knight. The rook and the king have to babysit that pinned knight. The rook has to stay watching a square here. There's only one piece that can move for white. This guy here. And it doesn't have a wide range of options. It has to stay tethered to the defense of the b pawn. So what would happen if this bishop just pivoted about along this diagonal? How can black make progress? Well, with the piece that is not yet doing anything. This guy. The king could go all the way up here, and then the b pawn can be tracked. And what are you supposed to do about this idea? Also note, you can't even unpin the knight. If you try king f2, saying, okay, now I'm ready to move the knight and we're just going to exchange rooks. No, hang on. As soon as the knight moves, there's bishop h4, and black will win a full rook next. So, what is white's try here? After the move, bishop a4, it is rook a1. Bishop slips into c2. Next up, e4, of course. White goes wrong here. Wonder if you can spot the best move, the only move in this case. Feel free to pause the video. Okay, I imagine many of you spotted this one. We're on this half open, or this completely open file for a reason, and that is to put the rook on a7. White does not play in this way. How would this look if this top move was played? In the game, it was bishop g3. Here's how it would play out. Black would win this piece here, track down the knight, but just a couple moves later, white's going to get the piece back. This is considered level. Rook takes bishop nearby. All right, we do not see the rook activated. White's plan here, after bishop c2, try and tame the pressure here along the g file. In comes the check, king f2, and now the h pawn to disrupt things along this file. White from here now plays rook to a7. If the knight goes to e3 here, here's how black can continue. You could play h4 and play a position where you track down the two minor pieces. Keep this guy right here, prevent the pivot. This is excellent for black. Awesome square on f5 maybe. Could enter like this or that. You're spoiled for choice. Completely winning for black. Two minor pieces, two bishops here versus the rook. All right, in this game, what do we have in response to h5? It is rook a7. And now the winning way, swipe that knight. Playing h4 here, there's just knight takes h4. This guy is pinned. So we swipe the knight and only now play h4. Bishop takes h4. This positional pressure is now converted to the win of material. Rook takes rook check from here. If you take the bishop, there's going to be rook takes rook, king takes rook, and the bishop falls. That's only good enough for a draw. Rook takes rook check in this game. King f3. Currently, black is up a full rook, but white will be getting this bishop. We'll soon be looking at black being up just the exchange. You can't defend the bishop because there's king takes rook here, so rook takes h2. Bishop is tracked down. Black rook now hunting the b pawn. No fear of any discovered check with all pieces here on light. Bishop g5 check. King steps up. B pawn tracked down. And now we're going in for mate. What do you do here? Rook takes e6. Don't move forward in this case. One little test here, one final test, I should say, for Capablanca. You step up, you're going to get mated. Capablanca obviously passes this test. He plays king to h7, and now white resigns. You're going to get mated soon. What do? You throw in a silly check after king here, you got nothing. Next up, let's just say a pawn advances, there's going to be mate. If the king tries to make a run for it, you're not going to run too far because there would be mate on h2. And you better pull off that mate. In fact, it may be black who is in some hot water if the king is allowed to get here. Bishop, rook cutting off the king, passer here. All right, we would have mate. There is no surviving this as white. One mini test there for Capablanca after this capture. He's not stepping up. King h7, white resigns. So, what'd you think of this one? Feel free as usual to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.